All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon and a warm welcome to you all. My name's Edwin Shield and I'm Director of Communications and Outreach here at the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, or for short, which is always much simpler, ATSE. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands from where I'm joining from today, and that's the Ngunnawal people. And I'd like to do that in the Ngunnawal language. Daura Nuna, Daura Ngunnawal, Yangu Nalamanyan, Dunamanyan, Ngunnawal Wari, Dawa Wari, Dindi Wangiralijin Yin. So today I'd like to acknowledge and pay our respects to elders past, present, emerging here on beautiful Ngunnawal country in Canberra. Before we get on today's webinar, I just want to start with a bit of housekeeping. Just want to remind everybody joining today to pose your questions to individuals and maintain respect and some of those loving good vibes as we talk about science communication in an age of misinformation today. This webinar will be recorded and we'll be making it available on ATSE's YouTube shortly after today's session. So please do share it amongst your colleagues and your peers and your friends, as well as teachers, wherever you might be joining us from today. We're also happy to send the link through to all registrants as well too. Captions should be enabled today. So if you require them, they should all pop up at the bottom of your screen. As today's session progresses, the feedback surveys will be shared in the chat, and please do take a moment to complete them because they're really good feedback for us here at the Academy. We're really keen to make this an interactive session, so please be sure to submit your questions in the Q&A box down at the bottom panel of your screen at any point through the webinar. And as I said, you can either single out an individual or we can direct your question to somebody specifically or to all the panelists. Now, before I hand over today's moderator and our brilliant panelists, I'd just like to share a little bit of information about myself. So as I said, my name is Edwin. I'm Director of Communications here at ATSE. I've always loved the power of a good story. Stories paint a picture, they conjure memories, and they simplify complexity. I studied media and journalism and international relations, as well as international communications, as both an undergraduate student and a postgraduate student. After my studies, I became a journalist for SBS, which is Australia's multicultural broadcaster. After a very short period of 6 months, I decided I just wasn't a very good journalist. I was a bit shy and I didn't like asking people tough questions. I felt awkward. It made them feel awkward. So I just really rather didn't do it. So I became an international aid communicator for World Vision. So an international aid communicator is somebody who tells stories about development programs all around the world. I promoted healthcare, water, human rights, and that role took me to refugee communities all around the world. The most memorable experience being spending 6 weeks in the refugee camps in South Sudan, in Darfur, with a lot of the displaced communities there. And I got to document and tell stories of refugees and how they were coping with the conflict. Later, I became a human rights media manager with Amnesty International, which is a big charity here in Australia, and also worked in the United Nations in both Bangladesh and Switzerland over the last 10 years. I now get a great job of helping Australia's top engineers and applied scientists share their stories, share their passion, and try to crystallize their efforts on major issues like climate change and how Australia can reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. That's a major passion area of mine. I'm also really passionate about the importance of fact and evidence-based information. And that's so critical today, where so many of you receive information from a multitude of different sources, from social media through to television, much of which is fake, imagery which is generated by artificial intelligence. And so never before has evidence-based communications been more important. Today, this series is brought to you by ATSE's National STEM Education Initiative, which is called Stellar. The program's designed to engage young people in STEM learning at school using hands-on curriculum-aligned resources to explore the principles of sustainability and renewable energy. Along with the Stellar program, We also aim to create pathways to inspire young people to pursue careers, jobs in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we have a program called Elevate, which is helping to boost women in STEM by providing scholarships in undergraduate studies and PhD studies as well too. As I mentioned earlier, the theme of today's event is science communication, a voice for STEM in an age of misinformation. And as part of this discussion, we'll be celebrating International Literacy Week as well too. Today we're joined by some incredible leaders in the science communication space, and I really hope you enjoy their stories. It's now my absolute pleasure to introduce you to the host of today's session and our first speaker, Dr. Susannah Eliott. Susannah is a fellow of our Academy and CEO of the Australian Science Media Centre. Just a little bit about Susannah before I pass the microphone. So as CEO of AusSMC, the Australian Science Media Centre, Susannah has been a driving force in improving Australia's access to trusted information about science and technology. Following an early career in cell biology, Susannah turned her interest into science communication, managing the University of Technology Sydney's Centre for Science Communication, and later establishing the Australian Science Media Centre. She has more than 25 years of experience in science communication, with the interface between science and the media being her primary focus. She's a member of the Inspiring South Australia Steering Group, a judge for the Eureka and Walkley Science Journalism Awards, and an occasional media commentator. The Australian Science Media Centre works with around 2,000 journalists all around Australia and internationally, and around 6,000 qualified experts, so scientists and technologists. They do this to support accurate reporting of science and technology in the media. Susannah has supported the work of science media centres in other parts of the world, also including New Zealand, Taiwan, Germany, Spain, Japan, the UK, and Kenya. She's passionate about increasing the amount, accessibility, and visibility of Australian research and science in the media. And with that very impressive background, I'd love to pass to Susannah. Thanks for joining us today and for hosting this amazing session. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Edwin. I hope you can hear me. Yes, great. Okay, so welcome everyone. It's so fantastic to be here. I'm talking to you this morning from the lands of the Kaurna people. The Kaurna people live on the Adelaide Plains, and they still have a very, very strong connection to the lands and the waters in this area, which is fantastic to see. What Edwin didn't mention was that I'm just getting over the flu. So if I say anything that doesn't make any sense to you, then please put a message in the chat and or correct me if I'm wrong. So look, I think this is a really fantastic webinar topic and something that's very close to my heart as well, because the issue of misinformation and how STEM can overcome misinformation is something that we deal with at the Science Media Centre every day. But before I go on, I'd like to introduce our other two panellists today, and so that we can have a really interesting discussion. Now, I am going to read their bios, so you'll have to forgive me. I just don't want to make any mistakes. So we are joined today by Dr. Catriona Nguyen Robertson. So Catriona is a singing scientist. She sings in the laboratory and contemplates immunology in the shower. Catriona is an immunologist turned science communicator and educator, and you can often catch her singing and dancing on social media and around museums. Museums Victoria as a learning facilitator. I can't wait to hear from Catriona about the work that she does. She also teaches the next generation of STEM researchers how to communicate their work at the University of Melbourne. Catriona hosts the radio show Science Queries on Joy 94.9, if you want to grab that note so you can hear her, and co-hosts Lost in Science and Radio Silence. She engages with science mentoring and outreach programs and is an advocate for diversity and inclusion in STEM. Fantastic to have you with us, Catriona. We will also be joined by, or are joined by, Adam Hutner-Koros. And Adam is a science communicator from Canberra. He has worked in areas as diverse as supercomputing, climate modelling, seed banking, and artificial intelligence. With interests spanning across science and linguistics, his broad experience in languages and science writing often comes in handy for cross-cultural and cross-disciplinary communication. His career has focused on learning from technologists and scientists of all different kinds in order to learn and write about the most varied range of topics possible. So, two fantastic people that we're joined by today. So, I might just now talk to you a little bit about my career trajectory, and then we can have a discussion about science communication. You can ask us your questions, and we can give you our top tips if you're interested in getting into this career. So, my science life started with this guy called a slime mold. Now, you might not have heard of slime molds. Most people haven't heard of slime molds, and I know they sound disgusting. And that's why I want to tell you about them, because I want you to understand how beautiful these creatures are and that they're actually not disgusting at all. And it really was the start of my science communication journey, because let's face it, if you work on a disgusting species, you have to spend a lot of time explaining to people how beautiful these creatures actually are. So you really get very good at communicating. So slime molds, they start off as a single cell. It's actually an amoeba. So this amoeba crawls around in the soil eating bacteria and can live its life like this very happily for generations and will never change, actually. It just divides and keeps going that way. However, if they run out of food, they do this really remarkable thing. They actually start streaming together. So what happens are these hungry cells send out a message into the soil, and that attracts the other cells, and they all start streaming together. If you want to give me the next image. So you can see all these cells, they start streaming together, these individual cells, and they form this strange multicellular creature, which, if you want to give me the next picture. So this strange thing actually has what's called differentiation. So that tip at the edge is attracted to light. So it acts like a lens, even though all of these cells started off very much the same in the soil. Once they get together, they decide what to do inside this creature, and they move together as a unit, leaving behind a layer of slime as they go. Eventually, that creature, that animal-like thing, becomes a plant-like thing, which is a long stalk with a ball of spores on the top. And then what happens is, through insects passing by and wind and rain, the spores at the top in that ball there get spread, and they get spread far and wide, where they can germinate and find more food to eat. So this whole life cycle's got nothing to do with reproduction. It's really just a way of getting from a place where there's no food to a place where there's more food. And it's a remarkable thing. The interesting thing about slime molds too is that they're not, even though they look like animals, they look a bit like plants, they look a bit like fungi, but they're none of them. So they're not fungus, they're not a plant, not an animal. They belong in a kingdom all of their own, the protozoa. So there are slime molds, and I spent so much of my time doing, writing about and communicating about slime molds that I actually got really interested in science communication and decided that that was going to be my area. And so instead of continuing on with my research on slime molds, I then went and did postgraduate studies in science journalism, and got a whole career in science communication. So armed with my PhD on slime molds and my postgraduate studies in journalism, I then got a job in Sweden at the Academy of Science there in 2000, in an organisation that looks at global change. So my job was to try and communicate to the world how the globe was changing over time. So we had 10,000 scientists all over the world trying to understand and putting together the bits and pieces of information that they'd created about the world and how it was changing, how the planet is changing. It was a very challenging job, but it was incredibly exciting and I got to travel a lot. So I went to Romania. If you want to give me the next picture, Graham. Romania, and then on to, I think it was Spain, and then to, what was the next place? Russia, that's right. And then to, I think it was South America. And in all, I think I went to about 40 different countries during my 5 years in Sweden. So it was an amazing job, very exciting and extremely rewarding, and also very, very challenging. So following that job, I then finally got a job at the Australian Science Media Centre in Adelaide, based in Adelaide, and this building is the old Stock Exchange, which they turned into the Science Exchange, and that's what it's called now. And at the Science Media Centre, as Edward mentioned, we do a lot of work with journalists and scientists around the country, and we run a platform called SciMex, if you want to give me that last image, Graham. So we're working with, we do a lot of work on countering misinformation and informing big issues like vaping and COVID and, just you name it, really, any of the big issues, anything that's controversial, we try to inform the public by working with journalists. And we run this big platform called SciMex, which is the last image, Graham. Thank you. Which just brings all of the work that we do together and provides journalists with really accurate information that they can use in reporting all sorts of stuff. And hopefully some of it finds its way into your news feed, wherever you're getting your news from. So that was my career trajectory. And what I'll do now is I'll pass over to Catriona to talk to us a little bit about how she got into science communication. Then we'll hear from Adam, and then we can have a discussion. Thank you, Catriona.
Thank you, Susannah. I think my internet has gone kind of in and out, so if I start to lag, please let me know because I won't know. So I think this statement is quite true, that a scientist can be many, many different things, and I feel like what I have done over the years has changed, but I still consider myself a scientist. And the skills that you learn with an education in STEM, they stay with you, and so no matter what you do, like, you're still using those skills, so you're still using those STEM skills, and I think that's always kind of important to remember. So in terms of where my journey started, I wanted to be like my dad. I wanted to do medicine. I also had quite a lot of family expectations, I guess, as well, to do medicine. So I did a Bachelor of Science and then thought, okay, from there I'm going to do medicine. But during my undergraduate degree, I tried a little bit of lab work and I realized it was quite fun. So that's kind of my first little tip, like, try different things. So I tried it and it was fun, and so I went into research. I then did honours, and then I did a PhD, because at the end of honours, I couldn't imagine not going into the lab every day and still working on the research project. But during my studies, I started dabbling in tutoring and mentoring programs. So I tutored high school students and primary school students, and I really enjoyed that. I also was part of mentoring programs that put me into schools, and I would work with either a group of students or a class, and it was really fun working with students and thinking about different ways of teaching and ways of learning. And so now I'm actually a university teacher at the University of Melbourne, and I teach research students how to communicate their work. And how to talk about science to very, very different audiences. Because I think, today's conversation is all about this age of misinformation. And so in an age of misinformation, I think it's really important that people doing the work and people doing the research and science know how to talk about their work to other people. But during my studies, I also started to write. I literally just put my hand up and I volunteered for 2 organizations the Royal Society of Victoria and the Convergent Science Network. And I went up to them and I said, hi, I'm a student. I'm interested in this idea of science communication. Can I do anything for you? And it started off with writing. And then the more I kind of built up my, I guess, portfolio and the more they realized I could do, they asked me to start emceeing events and doing more things. So with these two organizations now, my role has changed and shifted a little bit. So I still do a lot of writing, but I also help organise National Science Week in Victoria, and I'm part of the Inspiring Victoria board. So Susannah and I are kind of like Inspiring Australia buddies, but different states and territories. But yeah, I think it was really amazing that I started off just by asking a question like, can I help you? And I volunteered, and now I actually get paid to do some of that work. So, you know, sometimes it takes a little bit of guts, but if you put yourself out there, it can lead to really great things. And so now I write, and I'm the senior editor for this magazine, Science Victoria. And now I also host a radio show. I host my own because I thought, you know what, I'm just going to pitch this, and it got up, which astounded me. But it's amazing to think I can now share science with an audience on a radio station that didn't have any STEM content before. And I also help other groups because as Susannah read out in my bio, I also co-host 2 other radio shows. And they're turned into podcasts and things as well. And I also present shows at ScienceWorks. If you've been to Melbourne or you've grown up in Melbourne, ScienceWorks and Melbourne Museum, they're kind of iconic. ScienceWorks is the science museum of Melbourne and Victoria. And I essentially create lightning or show people the stars in the planetarium. And I think it's really fun to be able to have had a background in biology and immunology research in particular. I'm really interested in the immune system, but now I'm sort of pushed to get out there and think about other kinds of science and how I can share them with different audiences. So how do I talk about electricity and lightning, and what can I tell people about space and astronomy and astrophysics? And lastly, during COVID in particular, I did a really daunting, scary thing. I thought, you know what, there is so much information out there about COVID. I am someone who studies the immune system, and I know a little bit about this. Some people in previous years, so in 2019, I competed in a science communication kind of competition where you've got 3 minutes to share your work, and I top and tailed my presentation with a little snippet of a song, and people seemed to like that. So I thought, okay, people like this idea of singing. It's a creative way of sharing science information. There's a lot of COVID information out there. What can I do to be different? And in lockdown, I posted my first song. And so now I sing several songs about science, about all sorts of different topics, but that was, like I said, it took a lot of guts. But now I'm kind of known as a singing scientist, and I've been asked by Channel 7 to come and sing about different science topics. So in all of this, in all of what I do, I think I've learned some pretty important lessons, like to find your people and have those people lift you up. When I published my first song, I was in lockdown, but I was on a video call with several people who were cheering me on to do it. So find the people that will support all of your endeavors, and mentors as well. And I've actually found quite a lot of mentors through ATSE. So I'm very, very grateful, like through the IMNIS program, as well as the ATSE Emerging Leaders Network. We're paired with a mentor. Also, give things a go and really show people what you can do. I never would have thought I'd go to a research conference and present people's research to them, but in song form. And the reason that the animations on this slide have been a little all over the place is because I don't think everyone's going to have one straightforward line path. I think I've kind of gone all over the place. I do lots of things at once, and I think for me it's really rewarding, and I love doing it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Catriona. That's really great. I have lots of questions for you, but I'm going to wait until after Adam has spoken, and then I can shoot some questions and also take questions from others as well. So over to you, Adam.
Thanks very much, Susanna. Yeah, it's really a great pleasure to get to talk to you all today and share a little bit about my career path. It's very different, I think, from Catriona's. One big difference actually is that I call myself a science communicator, but I've never called myself a scientist. I studied a double degree in science communication and linguistics at the ANU, but I actually started my degree doing physics instead of science communication. And when I realized that I had kind of maxed out the kind of physics knowledge that I wanted to learn, I moved into science communication, but I maintained my connections and my interest in all the different science topics around me at the university. So while I was studying, I got to touch on biology topics, philosophy, environmental science, mathematics, ethics, a few different language topics, lots of different linguistics. And in particular, I focused on the linguistics that goes on studying how language works between people, not so much how language works within language itself, although that's very fascinating. I was most interested in the social aspects of language and basically how people use language to communicate, how they communicate across different kinds of expertise, how they communicate across language barriers, and how they communicate across different cultures as well. And although there weren't many of us at the uni studying science communication and linguistics at the same time, it was really a great combination, I think, that set me up quite nicely to keep exploring this area of um, communicating between us. So as you can see on the screen, I've moved around a little bit since then. In the middle, you can see actually a scientific paper that I wrote, which was about science communication, which I did that with scientists from non-English speaking backgrounds who are working in Australia. So it was a very interesting group of scientists, and I kind of explored their experience of science communication from an academic perspective. But at the same time, I've done lots of other things, including freelance writing. So you can see on the right an article which I wrote for CSIRO's Double Helix magazine, which is a very popular science magazine for kids, which anyone is able to submit articles to. They take short articles like this, about 150 words. They also take longer articles, and any scientist or non-scientist is able to actually submit ideas to them, and they accept them. They actually pay for them as well. And it's a great way to practice your writing, to get the word out, and also just to have fun. As you can see in the supercomputing world on the left, I did move into an organization that focused on supercomputing, and that meant that it focused on all the different disciplines of science which use supercomputing. And so that's why I got to work with people doing artificial intelligence and doing climate science, doing quantum computing, doing environmental science. Every discipline of science you can imagine, there was someone studying it using the supercomputer. And that was a real thrill for me to get to work with all these different topics all at the same time. And actually, that's followed through to my current job now at the Academy. I'm a science communicator, a communication specialist at ATSE, working with Edwin. And what I get to do now is very similar to what I was doing before, which is actually working with scientists and engineers and technologists directly to help tell their stories better. And so in the past months, I've worked on things like the Murray-Darling Basin, on artificial intelligence, on all kinds of different aspects of science policy, climate policy, environmental policy, but also science education, teaching, many different topics, all part of this kind of bubble that I'm working in. Some of the funnest things that I get to do actually is talking directly to those researchers or those scientists or those engineers, learn about what they do and actually help them tell their stories better. So I'll just give you an example. One of the most interesting people that I met when I was working at the supercomputer was a guy who was studying weevils. Now, a weevil is a small insect. It's got 6 legs. It's a very specific species. There's many, many different species of weevil, but there's this whole family of weevils they exist all over the world. And I was talking to him because he had discovered maybe 30 or so previously unknown species that were extinct because they were trapped inside this kind of rock, which is 100 million years old. These weevils were extinct, but because they were trapped inside this rock, he was able to identify them, to differentiate between them, and to then discover, all these specific features of each individual weevil. So it was very interesting talking to him. And I asked him about all the other creatures which get stuck inside of these rocks. I said, what about insects, other insects, other animals? And he said, yes, of course, plants, bees, flies, they all get trapped inside these rocks historically, and then they fossilize, and that's how we can find them. But he said, I'm not interested in any of those. I'm just a weevil guy. He's only interested in weevils, and that was his job, his business, and his passion. And in collaboration with me, I was actually able to talk with him and help him tell his story about the weevils in a better, more interesting way, actually get his story to a broader audience of people. And so for me, doing science communication, it's about this cross-cultural, cross-disciplinary kind of work, but it's also about telling the stories every day. As science communicators, that's kind of our careers, but everyone can apply these skills to their own work in whatever format it makes sense. And so I guess that's the message I want to leave you with, just that you can do it any way you like, but these skills and this kind of way of thinking can be useful no matter what you do.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam. Really interesting careers. So look, now we're going to have a discussion. We've already got a couple of questions coming in, so please keep those questions coming into the Q&A box. And also feel free to ask Edwin a question too. That's all right, Edwin, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Edwin's got also, I mean, as you heard, he has a fascinating career trajectory as well. So please ask questions of any of us. So I'm just going to kick it off here. Catriona, so how do you juggle everything? You've just got so much going on there. How do you juggle it all?
Well, in high school, I was one of those students who was like, I'm going to do some sport, I'm going to do some music, I'm going to like focus on my studies too. So I think I've always been someone who wanted to do lots and lots of different things. And that's carried from high school. I dropped it a little bit in uni, I think, but I've kind of picked that up again. And yeah, I think for me, it's loving what I do. I make time for things. I try to work as efficiently as possible. I mean, that doesn't mean that I don't procrastinate, but I do try and get things done so I can do as many things as possible. But I'm learning to think about, in all these opportunities that come my way, what is aligned with my goals and my values, and what perhaps should I leave behind, or say no to. And I think learning those things, learning what you like and what you don't like, that's so important.
Terrific. Great. And Adam, you work with a lot of different kinds of scientists, and I can imagine, for me, I might feel a little bit uncomfortable if I'm a physicist talking to, for example, an entomologist who works on insects. How do you get comfortable working with these really different types of scientists coming from really different fields that you don't actually have expertise in?
Yeah, I think for me, the most important thing to learn was that I'm there to help them. My skills are different from their skills. My knowledge is different from their knowledge. But actually, I had the ability to help them out with telling their stories and getting their discoveries into a bigger audience in a way that they actually weren't able to do themselves. So if I approach them in a kind of like helpful way with curiosity, not pretending or trying to even understand everything they do, just coming to them with my questions, my interest in their work, and uh, a learning attitude that I could always get more from them, find out more, and really value what they were giving me and the time they were giving me. That helped me understand actually that um, there's the scientists and there's communicators. We obviously overlap a huge amount, but we can actually help each other out and together there is a really valuable role for us to do the work we do. So that helped me get comfortable. And then when you're comfortable, you can have fun, tell interesting stories, invent new ways of telling stories as well. And that's a great journey to go on.
Terrific. Great. Well, look, I'm going to start reading out some of the questions that we've got here. So the first one is, what subjects in school might help me follow a career in science communication? Do I have to do science in year 11 and 12? That's open to all three of you. Anybody got anything they want to say about that?
My suggestion is just to keep things broad. Um, you can obviously specialize in year 11 and 12 and more in uni, but the broader your interests, the more kind of background you have to draw on when you are pulling together your understanding. It actually helps you to understand more if you have a deeper context. So I would just say keep a wide range of topics, and that doesn't have to be science topics as well. I think if you study theatre or English or philosophy in year 11 and 12, that's also a useful background to have in your life.
Catriona?
I would agree with Adam. Like, I did a mix of everything, like humanities, language, and science in years 11 and 12. Adam and I got here to science communication, and Susannah as well, like through very different ways. You've heard from all three of us. And yeah, so I think keeping your options open, as Adam sort of says, and you can kind of work it out.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think from my side, I studied biology, but I didn't do chemistry. And in fact, I chose music rather than mathematics, which was possible when I went through. I don't know if it's still possible now. Probably shouldn't have been possible. But, you know, and it did make it a little bit challenging to then study science. And I needed to do some bridging a little bit in a bit of chemistry and maths. But on the whole, I don't think that it was a problem for me. And in fact, if anything, I dabbled a lot in art. So I did a lot of art subjects in high school. And I really feel that helped me very much in terms of science communication. And I think you would probably all agree. Um, and kind of going a little bit more broadly, you know, I feel like people tend to put their hobbies and their career in different bags, but I don't think you necessarily need to. So for me, science communication became something that really was a combination of my hobbies, which was my interest in art and in communication and radio and all of those things, and my chosen career, which was scientific research. And I just brought those two together. So never underestimate the value of your hobbies. They can be fantastic, and they're often the passion that you bring into your work. So that's what I would say. And Edwin, please jump in if you've got anything you want to add.
The only thing that I would add to all of those suggestions really is it's linking to Susannah's point about your passion and separating career from hobby. I mean, I didn't. I loved writing and I was just curious for information. So I did a Bachelor of Journalism and a Bachelor of Media, and that gave me skills to write, but it also just taught me to be curious of the world around as well too. And then from choosing a degree like that can give you lots of inroads into science and technology and engineering and to philosophy, but it hones your ability to think about the media that you interact with and turn that into a good quality piece of communication. So that's one route as well too. But as you've heard, that there's multiple ways into this domain.
Terrific. Okay, so next question. This is for you, Catriona. So many amazing opportunities and endeavours. How do you find these opportunities in your local community?
Well, it's great that you're asking. You know, asking people is a good way to start. And I mentioned finding mentors and finding people. All the things that I do, a lot of the opportunities that have come my way because I knew someone. Um, so the world kind of does work a little like that in the more people you know, the more people will put you forward for things and support you and say you'd be good at this. So some opportunities I've found just by having a chat with people. I've gone on lots of coffee outings with people just to have a chat. If I see someone doing something that I want to do one day, or I think they're doing something amazing, I'll be like, hey, can I have a chat with you and talk about how you got there, and try and work out the opportunities from there. But there are lots of community groups and local organizations that do a lot of volunteering work for science outreach. National Science Week is like a national thing. The Inspiring Australia program is also national. So there are so many different things that you can jump into if you keep your eyes open and look out for it, but also get people to nudge you and push you in the right direction too.
Terrific. I just realised how close we are to the end of this discussion already. That's amazing. So let me just jump into some of these other questions, see if we can get through a couple. Here's a question for all. Do you have any strategies you put in place that helped you succeed in your undergraduate, postgraduate studies?
For me, I think the important thing was actually engaging with the professors and the lecturers kind of as much as I could. They were generally eager to talk more and to answer questions further, um, or to kind of just give extra background, because obviously in class they can only go so far. And so one of the strategies that really worked for me was actually, yeah, being interested in them a bit more and then asking further questions on top of just the standard kind of work of the class. It was kind of more look broadly at what they do and learn from that.
Adam, while we've got you, this person has also asked for tips on getting through maths and physics subjects for first year undergrads.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did get through, but I didn't stick with it very long. My advice is actually that like maths is amazing. Maths can let you do so much, and maths is a core tool for doing lots of science in the future, including physics. And so you have to in some ways focus and study. Everyone is able to study maths and get good at maths. Um, and if you can get comfortable with maths, it opens so many different doors for doing all different kinds of science or maths or engineering or technology or other things in the future. So it's worth pushing through actually because it lets you do more interesting things more comfortably later. But it's really valuable.
Excellent. Um, Look, we're almost out of time. Do we have time for one more question, Edwin?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a really good question to end on, actually. What can students and teachers do to help filter the good media from the bad and fake media? Who wants to start with that one?
I feel like you're the perfect person to start with.
Okay, I'll jump in very quickly. Look, I think that the key thing, I mean, obviously there's so much in this, and it's becoming more and more challenging all the time with things like artificial intelligence that's capable of creating things like deep fake content that is really so realistic. It's very, very difficult sometimes to tell the real from the fake. The really key thing, I think, is where is this information coming from? Always look at the source. Always try and look behind. Don't just take things at face value. Think, now, who is actually providing this information to me and what motive might they have? So sometimes something can look like a really interesting science story, but actually they're trying to sell you a product. It might be some pills or whatever. And so you really need to look out for what's their motivation for communicating with you, who are they, and are they a trusted source? So that would be my main tip. But please, does anybody else have any tips here?
I would just add that my key word for this is curate. And be curious about what those authoritative, respected, trusted media sources are, and try and curate the news that you receive. I routinely go through my Instagram, my Facebook, all of my social media accounts and make sure that I'm following either fact-informed opinion news sites or individuals that are held in high regard, so that you receive quality information and you reduce the incidence of advertising or misinformation. The challenge is that there's such a plethora of information out there, as that can be quite a daunting task. But there are major media outlets such as the ABC, our national broadcaster, SBS, where I used to work, as well as The Guardian, who do a terrific job of fact-informed journalism. And I think it's really good to keep an eye on who you follow and the kind of information and news that they share, because that can really skew your view if you are finding yourself following all kinds of commentators and individuals that have a particular worldview, which might not be completely fact-informed, might be strong on opinion. So I think a good balance is always good to try and give you the best quality information.
Any other quick comments?
I might just add that
Yeah.
in general, if it's going to be an evidence-based perspective that you're reading, it's probably going to come from more than one single person. And so if you're hearing something which sounds kind of outlandish or crazy, it's possible that it's still real, but you'll probably be able to find several other people who also are sharing that perspective and who are probably actually acknowledging that this is quite a wild thing to be saying. If it's just a single person with no other people that you can spot who are on this same message, then that's a bit of a red flag.
Catriona, last word.
Well, I would agree what you all said. If I might just add to the previous question though, because I would say the same thing for this question. For the previous question, I think in terms of succeeding in university, learning how you learn is really, really important. For me, I figured it out and it made a world of difference. So, we all learn in different ways, and I think acknowledging that is important.
Terrific. Okay, well, I think that's all we have time for. So I'm going to hand back to Edwin now.
Thanks, Susannah, and thanks to Adam and Catriona for just sharing your magnificent career stories. Catriona, it's just it's endlessly impressive how many things you do and the focus you devote to them. So congratulations. And Adam, you've got such an amazing multilingual perspective of how to make science compelling. So thank you for sharing that. And Susannah, you're one of the leading figures in Australia, which is helping scientists to communicate their stories to the mass media. And that's a benefit that everybody in Australia receives because of your work. So thank you for all that you do. Thanks to all the classrooms, teachers and students that joined us today. We hope you found some of this informative, and there's some takeaways in terms of career paths that you might want to explore. There are more Shape Your Future Stellar sessions running this year, and our next session will be in late October. And it's looking at careers in education for World Teachers Day. So please join us again and share the news around that webinar for that exciting field. Finally, your feedback is super important to us. So please take a few minutes to complete the short survey that'll appear at the end of today's webinar. Thanks once again for joining us, and thanks to our excellent speakers for sharing their stories today.